Uncensored tonight, fallout from a disastrous White House meeting between President Trump and Ukrainian President Zelensky. Mr. Trump has now frozen all U.S. military aid to Ukraine. That initial meeting last week was supposed to be for a mineral rights deal between the two nations, U.S. and Ukraine. Instead, it turned into shouting and accusations in real time for the world to see.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country. We're going to feel very good. We're going to feel very good and very strong.
The president and vice president accused Zelensky of not being thankful enough for their efforts to end the war. Ukraine's leader said he wanted to be part of their peace talks with Russia and will not accept a deal without security assurances. Over the weekend, European leaders gathered in London to discuss strengthening support for Ukraine and developing a potential ceasefire plan. Joining us now here on The Factor Uncensored, Dr. Dietrich von Biedenfeld from Houston Community College and Dr. David Branham from the University of Houston downtown. Dr. von Biedenfeld, let's begin with you. Your thoughts about the president pausing these funds. Now, we're talking about around $66 billion that was approved by the Biden administration. And this, we're not talking about dollars, but we're talking about equipment, military equipment, and contracts to make equipment, military equipment for Ukraine.
Absolutely. And one of the concerns that national security experts would point out is keeping the conflict over there prevents it from spilling out over here in terms of, yes, we do have the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans, but there are instances such as 9/11 where terrorism finds its way to our shores. And so one of the challenges of us stopping this aid is it undermines their strategic planning. Just like businesses seek continuity in military planning, if you know that some of these third-party transfers, drawdown equipment transfers, and actual aid money for military equipment are stopped, how do you train? How do you anticipate? How do you expend ammunition? Do inventory control? A lot of those supply chain and logistics functions are now stymied because we don't know if we're going to get those extra 3 tanks to replace the ones. Maybe our battle tactics change. So it weakens the Ukrainian position, it strengthens the Russian position, and prospectively actually intensifies the likelihood of continuing conflict because now Putin is emboldened. And again, these are already appropriated funds, so it undermines the Article 1 powers of Congress by saying, we supersede you. And we saw Rubio looking very upset in that meeting because even today, if you go to the State Department website, they're touting the many pieces of aid and funding that have been sent to Ukraine. They have an itemized list of equipment, military equipment, whether it be munitions or anti-aircraft missiles. It's all on the State Department website, very expressly stating that Russia was the aggressor. And so then when your boss comes in behind you, we all know that feeling. You're like, thanks, boss. That's not accurate. You know, it becomes very painful.
And can the European nations, members of NATO, make up this hole that will be left by the U.S.? Right now, President Trump is saying it's a pause. But more than likely, that money won't arrive for a while, and we're told that Ukraine needs that money, or actually the equipment immediately. So can the European nations and NATO make up for this hole?
I don't think so. If you look at the dynamics of NATO, the United States is the leader, and it's not close. The United States is a big leader in NATO. You look at military spending. Most European countries don't come within 1/10 of what the United States does. So can Europe come in and back it up? They can help back it up, but there's no way that you can replace it. So Zelensky's in a very vulnerable position here, and I was a little surprised that he was willing to get into it with President Trump in the manner that he did. Because, you know, when President Trump says you don't have the cards, he's right. He's got a terrible poker hand. He's very vulnerable in Ukraine right now. And if the United States pulls out, it makes Ukraine even more vulnerable.
What should he have done on the world stage like that? Many people have said that was a setup.
Yeah, well, it was a setup, maybe. I don't know for sure. But what happened during that dynamic was that he took a position that Donald Trump didn't expect. You can kind of see that, where he was basically saying, look, you have to protect Ukraine from Putin. And Trump was basically saying, look, we are going to go in, send American corporations in to get minerals out of your country. our American feet are going to be on your ground. We're going to protect those American feet. So you shouldn't be worried about Putin coming in while we're there. So I think that was part of the dynamic, and I think what's going to happen is Zelensky's going to have to back down. When he went to Europe, he's saying, look, we need help. They're saying, well, you need to go back and get help from America as well as us, because unless you do that, you're not going to be strong enough.
Now, Dr. von Biedenfeld, there's $300+ billion in frozen Russian assets in Europe. Could they draw down on that and give that to Ukraine so they could use in the war effort?
Of course, we try to exercise authority under the rule of law. And so while the European nations could do this, it undermines some of those ideas if they do it unilaterally without some sort of due process for those Russian oligarchs and other individuals who they've stolen it from. There are other resources, but as Dr. Brennan mentioned, when you're talking about a 3-to-1 advantage of people, an 8-to-10 tank advantage for Russia over Ukraine, the European nations simply do not have the military budget, training, or resources. I mean, the British Navy and military struggled against Argentina 40 years ago. They're not equipped to deal with Russia today, and so they need the United States, but we don't know. When you talk about security, Michael Bolton had his removed. A lot of former Trump advisors have had their security removed. We know that if you do not appease the president, he will pull that out from under you, remove your portrait from the Pentagon, and there will be, it's scorched earth. So Zelensky should have known better.
All right, we'll be right back with you guys. Don't go anywhere. We'll continue Trump time after the break. And welcome back to The Factor Uncensored. Looking ahead to tomorrow, President Donald Trump is set to address a joint session of Congress for the first time since returning to the White House. His speech comes as he reshapes and continues to work to shrink the federal government. We continue Trump time tonight with our guests back on The Factor. Your thoughts, what will that address be like in the joint session of Congress? Your thoughts?
I think it'll be very structured. I think he's going to actually come out and have a real plan in place, and it's something that we haven't had, and I think the country will be receptive to it. If he doesn't do that, then I'll be surprised. But what we're getting now is Elon Musk bites, Donald Trump bites, these little messages here and there where people don't really know what to think. I think what he needs to do tomorrow is make sure everybody understands what path he's on, what he's trying to do, and where he's going.
What do you think we will hear from the president tomorrow, Dr. von Biedenfeld?
I think we'll hear a lot of superlatives. That is the style. He's trained in the WWE and other media. You're fired. So those very express and succinct and concise lines, I think we're going to see a lot of that. I agree with Dr. Branham that his speechwriters are probably going to have him structured, but I don't think it's necessarily going to be in an organized flow. And I think it's going to focus a lot on numbers that smaller part of Congress than his last term are going to be sitting down for, because even with the Doge receipts, we see these huge discrepancies. As we've discussed, this $80 billion is really $8 billion, and maybe it's really only 5.5, right? And so within that, I think we're going to hear a lot of superlative language, huge, beautiful, wonderful, a lot of self-promotion, a lot of self-congratulatory language, but also, to his point, I think there is going to be some outlining of what he considers to be a plan.
Will he be able to satisfy the American people, individuals who may have lost jobs as a result of his first actions in office, those who still are seeing high prices in the grocery store? Will he be able to support, at least win over those individuals with anything that he says tomorrow?
No, I think he's in a honeymoon period right now, so people are letting him get away with a lot right now. But I don't think he's going to convince anybody with what he says. What's going to have to happen in the end, he's going to have to produce. They're going to have to do a good job. They're going to have to get those prices down. I don't see that plan personally. How are you going to raise tariffs and get your prices down? That's good. So he's saying a lot right now. People are giving him that honeymoon. But if he comes out of that honeymoon and think he's not producing, then I think things will start to turn it against him more.
And of course, the tariffs against Canada and Mexico will go into effect tomorrow. If something changes, of course, we'll bring it to you here on The Factor. But as it stands, it will go into effect 25%, and also China, 10%. So what will we see? What will be the trickle down to the American people? on this?
I mean, we've got some easy numbers. Of course, the auto manufacturers looking at steel and some of their parts manufacturers in Canada and Mexico. We saw a lot of onshoring and nearshoring opportunities in COVID. We just don't have the retooling capacity and workforce and skilled labor force in the United States to do this quickly. So we might see up to $12,000 per vehicle increases, right? So those are easy numbers. But we also, when we say removing some of these agricultural dependencies, farmers just aren't equipped for this. And many of the products that these farmers use to do large-scale industrial farming come from other countries. So these tariffs are going to see very immediate effects. But again, in the speech tomorrow, I think we're going to see an emphasis on the affordability czar. And a lot of those positional things and those sort of, at least superficially, strategic steps where you can point to it and say, I've appointed an affordability czar. No one's going to dig beneath the surface to say what's the role, responsibility, authority, and actual deliverable. No, it sounds great, though.
All right. We want to thank you both for joining us here on The Factor tonight.